Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down a custom set of cards based around the characters, items, and events from Black Panther. So this is just one video in a series where I break down every single Marvel Cinematic Universe movie into a card set, and together they are called Magic the Marveling, and it's already pretty awesome. Now you don't need to have seen the other videos to understand these. There's just a couple things you should probably know. Generally, the heroes, which is a creature type, because Avenger, Hero, and Villain are now creature types. Heroes/Avengers are generally blue, red, white, and occasionally green, and villains are black, blue, and red. Now that's usually. Some, villains may end up having white in their colors because it makes sense for some other reason, but those are generally the colors they follow. Similarly, there are lots of little themes throughout the set that, red and black like to steal things and they get rewarded for that. There are little things like that. And then the last thing is to save space on the type line, I changed, normally a hero, let's take Black Panther. He would be a legendary creature, enhanced human hero, and that's a little bit too long. So instead I made it legendary hero enhanced human. So if you see legendary hero, just picture that as legendary creature with the type of hero, or legendary villain is legendary creature with the type of villain, but it's not like that. So why don't we take a look at a card that has that? So we have Black Panther Wakandan King. So you'll notice he's a legendary hero enhanced human noble. So that just saves a little bit of space, but let me talk about Black Panther, the set as a whole. So when I design a set, I don't just pick cards and try to make them a little bit flavorful. I try to have overarching themes within the individual movies. And I was like, okay, Black Panther, there's a quest for power. There's who is the Black Panther, who is king. And I'm trying to think of a mechanic because I like to build mechanics. And I was like, wait, why am I building a mechanic? One already exists, and you'll see that with Black Panther Wakandan King. He's one, red, green, white, which are the colors of Wakanda. Legendary hero, enhanced human noble, 4/4 with first strike. And he says, whenever he enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. So yes, the monarch is kind of what the Black Panther set cares about. When Black Panther Wakandan King attacks, if you are the monarch, untap him and prevent all damage that would be dealt to creatures you control until the beginning of your next turn. So his whole thing is, I'm going to become the monarch and I'm going to stay the monarch. So he's going to, even when he attacks, he's vigilant. He's not going to let you through to hit, and he can now chump block without actually losing people because he's preventing all damage. And then he has an ability to pay 2 in a red, and he fights target creature, and you can activate this ability only if an opponent is the monarch. So he has an ability to, stay the monarch, but if he is knocked down, then he has this awesome ability to reduce their opponent's defenses so that he can become the monarch once again. And if you guys don't know what monarch is, it's essentially, if you become the monarch, you get this token, but it's not a real token. It's kind of like City's Blessing. That's at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. And then if anyone hits you with a creature, so if they swing at you and you let it through, then they become the monarch. So it's kind of this war of who is the monarch. So how they would become the monarch is be able to get past Black Panther and his army. Next we have Killmonger Usurper. So he's kind of the opposite of Black Panther. So he's one, red, white, black. So here again we have red and white, which are the stronger colors of Wakanda in terms of, they are primarily red and white, and while he isn't exactly Wakandan, he wants to be. So he's red and white, and then he adds that black in there because he is a villain. So he's a legendary villain enhanced human. He's a 4/4 with first strike, similar to Black Panther, so they will defeat each other in combat. And he says whenever he enters the battlefield, a random opponent becomes the monarch. So he comes into the world, and basically he's like, I'm not king, so he has to become king. And so whenever he attacks, if it is attacking the monarch, it gains non-basic land walk until end of turn. So he is really good at becoming the monarch, because if you control a non-basic land, and you are the monarch, Killmonger is almost always going to get through. And then he also has an ability, pay 1 in a red, and all creatures get +1/+0 until end of turn. Activate this ability only if you are the monarch. And that is all creatures, including your opponents. Because once he becomes a king, what does he do? He wants to start this violence, and he obviously has his reasons, but he wants everyone to just, not everyone, but he wants more violence to ensue, and by bumping everyone's power up, you can mess with your opponent's creatures, you can make it more dangerous for anyone to attack, so keep that in mind. Also, he has first strike, so he gains the biggest advantage from this. Next we have Ulysses Claw, Vibranium Thief. He's 3 and a black for legendary villain, human thief, 3/3, and whenever he deals combat damage to a player, sell target artifact that player controls. So sell is a mechanic custom to the set, introduced with Guardians of the Galaxy. And essentially what it is you exile whatever you're selling. So normally you sell your own stuff, but he's a special case where you sell target artifact that. So let's say you attack Jim, and Jim has a soul ring on the battlefield. Well, now you can sell it. And what's going to happen is it's going to get exiled, and then each person is going to name a number. And then you pick, since you're the one selling, you pick the number, you pick whatever number you like the best. So if Jim says 5, you might pick that because that's the highest number. No, you don't get to pick a number. I mean, you don't get to say a number. And then you pick the number you like, or you don't pick any number. And say you put someone says 5, you then give them the exiled thing comes back under their control, and you create whatever number amount of unit tokens, which are basically colorless treasures that also, if you sack 2 of them, you can get colors. So it's either 1 unit token for colorless or 2 unit tokens for colored. But generally, you just exile something, everyone tells you how many units they'd be willing to give you for it, and you pick whoever you want. So and then if you don't pick anyone, you get 1 unit token and it stays exiled. So that way you can't just keep like flickering something by selling it. So essentially, you're not going to have control of it in the end. But here, he's selling something his opponents control because he is a thief. So that's kind of interesting. So you hit someone, exile 1 other things, everyone bids on it, including the person you just stole it from. You give it to whoever says the highest number, you create a bunch of units. Now, this can be abused, but it's clearly more of a casual, mechanic. Like if you teamed up with someone, they could say 17 million, but also there are ways to generate infinite mana, so who knows? And then it says whenever a player sells, each opponent loses 1 life. So whether they're selling or you're selling, they are going to lose 1 life, each opponent. So this might be the head of a deck that likes to sell a bunch of things. I don't know if there's enough cards for that, and definitely not in mono black, but it is interesting to see a creature built all around selling. Next we have Shuri, Technical Innovator. She is 2 red and a white for a legendary creature, human scientist 3/3, and at the beginning of your end step, if you are the monarch, put a vibranium counter on up to 2 target artifacts you control. Then you can remove 3 vibranium counters from permanent you control and create a random token innovation. Okay, Black Panther is probably one of my most complicated sets. We have to talk about what Monarch is, talk about what selling is, talk about what units are. Now we talk about what innovations are. They are new to Black Panther, and why don't we just look at them? So here are a couple options for them. So basically, you take every single option for an innovation, and you basically assign each a number, roll a die. Whatever number you get, you create one. So you would say these are the only 3. There are a couple more if you want to see a link to every single card, because I don't have time to talk about every single card. There'll be a link in the description, but generally, so let's say there were only these 3. You would roll a die, and if you got a 2, you would create Killmonger beads, and it would just be a token that has these abilities. So essentially, with her, if you're the monarch, you have every 2 turns, and every 2 turns you create an innovation. So these are just some examples of innovation. So they're kind of just useful utility artifacts that can be created randomly. So I think those are pretty cool. There are a couple other cards that generate them, and I may add more in the future. Next we have Okoye. It's 1 red and a white for a legendary creature, human warrior, 6/4 with trample, and at the beginning of each upkeep, the monarch gains control of Okoye. And then, whenever she deals combat damage to a player, create a red and white XX human soldier creature token, where X is the amount of combat damage dealt by Okoye this turn. So a very powerful card for 3, but if someone can manage to become the monarch, now that's coming against you. And you can pay 3 to gain control of Okoye, but remember, she still has the ability at the beginning of each upkeep, the monarch gains control of it. So you essentially have to have some way to abuse that 3 cost, because it won't have haste, which means that you'll gain control of it, and then by the time it's your next turn, it'll be gone again. So you essentially use this to get Okoye out of the way, but it's supposed to show how she is loyal to the throne, but then realizes that, she needs to, maybe blindly following isn't the move, so you're able to kind of do that with mana. So that's kind of her story on a card, and I really actually like the design of this. Next we have Nakia. She's 1 green and a white for legendary creature, human warrior, and says whenever she attacks, each player creates a unit token, and then you can sacrifice a unit, and target creature gains protection from the color of your choice. This is a very simple card. She wants to help the world. The world, we should be sharing our resources. So whenever she attacks, she's going to be helping all players. And then you can sacrifice units to protect your stuff because she still wants to protect her people. Very simple card. but also very flavorful. Next we have Everross. It's a 3-cost white legendary creature human 1/1, and it gets +1/+1 for each color among other permanents you control, and you can tap and gain X life, where X is the number of permanents you, among other colors among permanents you control. So just basically, you want to put this in a multicolor deck. It's supposed to be about him going outside of his comfort zone, out of his main color, that being white. And so, if he is near a black creature, or a blue creature, or a red creature, or a green creature, or an all-color creature, he's kind of going out of his comfort zone. That's what he does in the story, so you get rewarded for that. Next, we have Wakabi. It's a 3-cost green and white legendary creature human 0/4 with Defender, and whenever a creature you control with Defender blocks, you gain life equal to its toughness. So this can already be the head of a commander deck, just with that text. But it says, at the beginning of each end step, if you gain 10 or more life that turn, you become the monarch. So if you block with 10 toughness worth of creatures, you become the monarch. And this is because he's part of the border tribe, he defends. I think it makes a lot of sense. Next we have Zuri. It's 1 green and white for a legendary creature human 0/5. So here we go, good defender. Whenever you gain life, target creature gains trample until end of turn, and then you can pay 1 and tap, and you gain life equal to the highest power among creatures you control. So just, this one cares about power instead of toughness, so it kind of works with high power, high toughness decks. Just lots of different uses for Zuri. Next we have Emenaku, 2 green and a red for a legendary creature human 4/4 with trample, and whenever it attacks, if it is attacking the monarch, it gets +4/+4. Obviously this isn't encompassing his whole story, but it's, I do need some simpler cards. So he does want to become the monarch, so he's going to be stronger when attacking. Next we have Ramonda. It's 1 white for a 2/3 legendary creature, human noble. And whenever another non-token human enters the battlefield, scry 1. If you are the monarch, create a 1/1 red, white, and green human soldier creature token. So whenever a non-token human enters the battlefield, and that's under anyone's control, and that's purposeful. And then you can tap and put a flying, lifelink, or first strike counter on target attacking human. So just kind of help in combat, but not actually maybe participate in it. Just because in the movie she takes more of a guide role. Although she does get some action in kind of, I tried to balance it a little bit, but she's kind of this leader, and that first ability really shows that. Next we have Chaka, Ancestral Guide, and this is a really interesting design for a card. So it's a 0/2, 1-cost white legendary creature spirit, and Chaka Ancestral Guide can't attack or block, so it's just going to sit there, can't attack, can't block. But when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, exile face down, shuffle your library. Then, when it dies, return the exiled card to your hand. So the idea is this is a tutor, and this is a mono-white tutor that lets you tutor for anything, but you have to manage to get Chaka killed. So it has to be basically either you have to run kill spells, or your opponent has to destroy it. Now, this is a big risk. If this gets exiled, that card that you exiled face down is remaining exiled forever. So if that was an important card, well, now it's gone forever. So it is a risk, and so it's an interesting card. Works well with sacrifice outlets, obviously, but the idea here is that he's going to guide you to where you need to go, and you kind of have to let go and become your own person to actually learn what you just searched for. So pretty cool card. Next we have Wakanda. It's a legendary land, and it says at the beginning of each upkeep, the monarch gains control of Wakanda. If it changes controllers, untap it. That's just so no one taps it in response to the trigger. Then whenever you are dealt damage by a source, that source's controller becomes the monarch. Which you might be like, oh, that's already what happens. But no, this means if you have shock in hand and you shock someone, now you're the monarch. So this makes becoming the monarch much easier. You don't have to just use combat, which I think is an interesting perspective. But also, it is an untapped land that taps for 3 colors. So the idea here is that if anyone can hit you, you are losing this land, but it is a really good land to enter the battlefield. Next we have Fight. So, sorry, these are just 3 of my favorite cards from the set that maybe aren't super, they're not legendary in terms of being a legendary type, but they're cool. So we have Fight for the Throne. It's a 1-cost red sorcery, and it says choose 2 players. Those players reveal the top cards of their library. The player who reveals the card with the highest converted mana cost becomes the monarch, and the other loses 2 life. If the converted mana costs are equal, repeat this process until the tie is broken. Put all revealed cards on the bottom of their owner's library. And there are cards that actually work like this, where people are revealing their top card in order to see who wins. So this is kind of like playing a game of war, but whoever wins the war becomes the monarch. So that's pretty cool. We have Aid the World, you know, obviously based on Killmonger, what Killmonger wants to think, and you can pay 2 and a red, or it also could be what Black Panther Chaka thinks at the end. And then as long as you are the monarch, each permanent you control has pay 1, tap it. Target opponent gains control of this permanent, draw cards. You can give your opponent stuff. Now, generally, this would be in like a group hug deck, or it could be in a deck full of awful things that you wouldn't want your opponents to, that your opponents wouldn't want. Now, this is an interesting card. And then, by the way, when it says when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. So at its worst, this is just pay 3, become the monarch. But then also you can give your opponent stuff if they need it. It does end, you know, obviously they get it tapped, but that's kind of interesting. And then we have a Hidden Nation. It's 1 and then red, green, white, the colors of Wakanda, for an enchantment. And it says all permanents in your hand and on the battlefield have Morph X, where X is that card's converted mana cost. So you can just put any card from your hand, assuming it's a permanent. And obviously Morph is already kind of a tricky thing. You could just pretend to put any permanent face down. So there is a little bit of trust here. But obviously once they turn it up or the game ends, they do have to reveal it. But basically it lets you just morph anything to hide it a little bit. So I just enjoy what kind of gameplay this causes. And that's it for this video. Let me know what you guys thought of all the cards in the comments down below. You're probably seeing a bunch more. Scroll across the screen right now. Again, if you want to see all of the cards, there'll be a link in the description. There'll also be a link to a playlist where you can check out all the other videos like this. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.